Hello and welcome back everybody to the Foodbuild factory, where today we're going to take a look at the Supermutant Imposter, the lovely fellow you can see here. This behemoth of a character will going to be a power armor, bloodied melee character, and let's get right into it. As always, I'm going to show off some gameplay in the first place, and in the latter half of the video I'm going to provide you with some info about the equipment and the build itself, meaning perks and such. So as you can see here, I just seen that our HUD shows that we're at about 35% health, but that's not right. Let me just fix that real quick. If we take something, yeah, we're at about 23% now, and yeah, next hit we're going to get into nerd rage territory here. So as for the gameplay, it's pretty straightforward. You're designed to one-shot pretty much everything, and you can still tank quite some damage. So one thing to notice that up until now I didn't really show off any bloodied characters on this channel, simply because, as you know from my description, I tried to do builds that are pretty easy to recreate and don't involve all that high level or much expensive gear. But with this character here, it's surprisingly easy to achieve. That's why I made it. The only thing that's worth noting here is the emergency protocols on the torso, the power armor torso, and our bloodied super sledge. As I will show you later though, the super sledge is essentially a 1-star. Not only essentially, but quite literally. It's a 1-star bloodied super sledge. So it's, even though it's bloodied, it won't be all that expensive. I bought this one for 200 caps at a player vendor, which still was a bit lucky, but you shouldn't need to pay more than 1 or 2k for it if you try to find one. And as for the power armor, well, depending on which power armor you use, if you use T51, T45 and T60, I think they all have fixed vendors that sell the plan for the emergency protocols. And if you want to use higher grade power armor like the like the Ultrasight power armor or the XO1, well, you need some luck, but I'm sure you can find someone who can craft it for you. It's not that hard to do, actually. You will also see when I go over the perks later that there's not a whole lot you have to do. Like, there's pretty much... yeah, there's a lot of room for perks to pick for yourself. You have like 5 essential perks or something. It's really not that hard to do a bloodied character. And I know from reading on Reddit mainly that a lot of people, and especially casual players, tend to fear that bloody builds are tedious and dying a lot, but that's not really the case. For the dying part, it's really, there are some essential perks you need to make it work, but after that it's really not that bad. As you will see in this video here, you can go all in, guns blazing, no problem. And the other thing is management. Like, people really think that you have to manage your health all the time. You have to always use red away and irradiate yourself again. It's not that hard. You'll pretty quickly find out which items to carry, so you can adjust your radiation level. So, for example, toxic goo, spoiled vegetables and stuff, they all work reasonably well to adjust your radiation, and especially with a power armor character, it's not that big of a deal. As you can see here, we're fighting ghouls, which are probably the biggest radiation dealers you will find, except for some certain places like radiation rumbles, narrow pathways and stuff, or radiation zones. But if you're not exactly going for hordes of ghouls, you can probably play for around an hour or something before you have to readjust your radiation level. It's not that big of a deal. You will see it while I'm playing, while I'm showing the gameplay. So, as you can see here, we're not taking any radiation at all. So, I was on the same level that I tended to stay away from bloodied builds for a long time. I mean, I don't have to tell you anything about their damage output or anything. You know that in terms of damage, bloodied is definitely the best choice you can go for. But what I wanted to do with this build is show how easy it can be to achieve a character that doesn't have to worry about anything all that much. And, well, one thing to mention with this character, as we're using, well, I will show you here, we're not using a power armor helmet, we're using the Fastnacht mask, the giant mask, which was one of the common ones. The problem is you won't have a Pip-Boy light, or helmet light in that case. So if you're exploring dark areas, it can be tedious. Like, you could carry a power armor helmet in your inventory and quickly equip it when you're in a dark area. That could be a good choice. It can be quite dark in this game. Sometimes even the lighting bugs and you don't really see a lot. But I found that it's not all that much of a problem. Not that big of a deal. You can really live without the light. Also for the aesthetics, it's pretty obvious here. We're going for the super mutant kind of look. So obviously this game doesn't have playable races, so you can't really play as ghoul or super mutant literally, but this is pretty much as near as it gets. I've chosen power armor for the simple reason that it makes us have a lot of radiation resistance, it makes us strong, and give us this bulky and big appearance, which fits the super mutant quite well. And with the Plague Rider skin, I think it's called, which was an Atomic Shop skin, you can have this sickly green appearance, which works pretty well, I'd say. Let's take a look. As long as it's light out there. So I think it really fits quite well, especially with the Fastnacht mask. By the way, in first person you probably can see it. Well, not that good, but the Super Sledge has the Blood Eagle skin equipped, which you can get from the legendary run. You still have some days left, but it's pretty likely you already have that skin. It just gives it this bloody appearance, this red appearance, which works quite well. The weapon of choice of a Super Sledge is quite obvious, simply because super mutants tend to use Super Sledges when they go for melee. Other choices, which would even be cheaper and still would work quite well, would be a board, for example. And you could obviously go for heavy weapons with this character. Being in power armor, you could even use stabilized, where minigun would probably be the best choice. But, well, that's about everything for now. Also, now that I think about it, another thing that works quite well with the whole super mutant theme is that you're, as a bloodied build, always very irradiated, which is pretty fitting if you think about it. So I guess that super mutants will carry a lot of radiation in their bodies too. And also you're quite heavily mutated. You can obviously with this character go for pretty much every mutation that you want to. Like, you can really try to max it out and go for 18 mutations. I think 18 is the max you can have. And none of them would have significant downsides to your character, simply because we do have Class Freak. I think we even have rank 3, we'll see later. And also, with this character you're already having a high damage output, but what you can do is I do have some perks in endurance that make our chems more effective and give us the chance to not get addicted to chems at all. So if you really need it, you can take a Fury, which would probably be the best choice in this case. It increases your damage resistance, well, not your damage resistance, but it reduces the damage you're taking, and also increases your melee attacks by another 30%. It's obviously quite overkill against the Scorched here, but if the Scorched Beast decides to land, we will see. My guess is, as it's a level 50, that we will... Well, it's legendary, it will regenerate, but it shouldn't take more than 5 or 6 hits, I guess, to take it down. Also, even though, one thing to mention, it might seem as if the sledgehammer is a one-handed weapon, but for those of you who don't know, if you're using a two-handed weapon in power armor, your character swings it with one arm, which I think is quite cool. Proportions work out pretty well too. Oh, we're quite low at health. And overall, yeah, what can I say? The build is quite easy. You don't have to think about a lot when you're playing. Obviously, when you are grouped, you should take a Stimpak here and there, simply because you're, after all, still running around at under 20% health, so you are still quite flimsy. You're not as tanky as our latest character was, but as long as you're encountering groups of 3 to 4 enemies or something, you have no problem at all. And the only thing that probably will kill you every now and then is either Mr. Gutsy's with ballistic ammo, or damage over time from Mirelurk Kings, for example, or the Mirelurk Queen. So damage over time can be... yeah, that will probably be your biggest problem. So, by the way, I give the Scorched Beast another few seconds to land, and if it doesn't, I'm just going to outrun it and want to show you the perks and the equipment. As for the equipment, there's not a lot to say, honestly. Most thing you can probably think about already. Well, I can do that on the fly, by the way. As for the power armor, it's a bit mixed. I do have, I think it should be 4 pieces of ultraside power armor with 3 pieces. No, 4 is right. Both arms, the torso, and one of the legs should be ultraside power armor. The torso being modded with emergency protocols, and the left leg, I think, if I'm remembering correctly here, is a T61, because I found a mod for the T60 legs, which give me the calibrated shocks, which is another 50 carry weight on one of the legs, and it didn't really matter after all, simply because we do use the skin anyways, and in power armor it doesn't really matter, except you're going for radar armor, for example, or excavator maybe, but everything higher than that should be enough to work for this build in terms of damage reduction, simply because the power armor has a built-in damage reduction of, I think it's 70%, I read somewhere. It's never stated in the game, but it's one thing people tend to forget when they talk about legendary armor and how power armor lacks in terms of convenience in this game. But the simple fact that it has some built-in damage reduction makes it way more useful. Like, you can really see that if you, for example, have a set of Vanguard's heavy combat armor, you will pretty easily get to a damage resistance and energy resistance numbers of power armor, but you will definitely not be as tanky as with power armor. Well, anyways, that's about it. We're now going to take a look at our mutations. and our build. So first and foremost, the build. As for strength, we have 15 strength, which should be obvious. Slugger, all maxed out. This should be obvious too. Martial artist. As I will show you, I only have a bloodied super sledge, which is a 1-star. So even if we have a bloodied swing speed version, I would still advise you to use martial artist. But especially on a 1-star weapon of the slugger variety, like this will be more or less essential. Otherwise, you just swing way too slow. We're not really interested in the weight reduction, simply because we only use that weapon. It's not that big of a deal, but the extra swing speed really benefits our perk, our character. As you can see here, and you should be aware by now if you watched my other videos, I pretty much always need bandolier or batteries included or something like that. I do have 1 rank of blocker. In a perfect world I would use 3 ranks of blocker here instead of bandolier, but you know the thrill by now. Just do it better when you do it. I have to have ammo on my character simply because I'm going to switch to a heavy gunner sooner or later. As for perception, we don't really need anything here. So we took Butcher's Bounty, which kind of fits the whole gory vibe of the super mutants, but another reasonable pick would be Glow Sight, for example, but you really don't need the extra damage. Endurance is pretty high here. We're at Endurance 12, Life Giver for another few hit points, which gives us more hit points at 20%, which is debatable. People tend to use their bloodied characters as glass cannons, and I often see how people use only 2 endurance or something. I do like higher endurance, more hit points. Yeah, it's up for debate, but in this case, especially if you're not using stealth or anything, I think it really benefits you to have more HP. Chem Fiend and Chem Resistance, I already talked about that. Chem Resistance makes it so we can not get addicted to chems. It's convenience. I mean, addictal is not that rare, so you could live without it, but I found it's quite cool. And Chem Fiend makes our chems last longer. Pretty self-explanatory here. Fireproof, always a good pick, especially with low health. This is never a bad choice. And lastly, but last but not least, we do have Radical, which is not essential for this build, but it's an obvious choice. It's only 1 perk point, and it's essentially at our health, which we bring down by radiation. We're having like +4 or 5 strength, which is in and of itself like 20 or 25% extra damage. So for 1 perk point, that's actually pretty good. Charisma here, yeah, you can use rank 4 of Lone Wanderer. I used Standardizer for a little bit more damage, which wasn't necessary, but I didn't really want to rank up Lone Wanderer simply because I didn't really need it. But a base of 4 charisma is never a bad choice. You could go down to 3 or something, but that's up to you. I choose 4 so I could later upgrade to Lone Wanderer 4. Intelligence, here we have Nerd Rage. This is another one of the essential perks. Basically what it does is under 20% health it significantly increases your survivability and your damage output a little bit. So you really want to have that. Yeah, it's a standard pick for bloodied builds. Makeshift Warrior, not necessary. You could honestly, if you really want to go all in on that mutant feeling, you can go down with your intelligence to only 3, and use those 5 perk points of Makeshift Warrior to use them in agility. Would be a good fit, or in luck for ricochet maybe. But after all, I just decided to stay here so I can level up a little bit quicker with higher intelligence. And Makeshift Warrior well, it's just convenient, so our weapon doesn't break that much, but you won't have that big of a problem with the sledgehammer anyways. Onto agility, pretty straightforward here. Through hiker, same as bandolier earlier. You know the thrill by now. It's just a convenience perk. Feel free to pick whatever you want here. Action boy rank 2 is enough, especially with lone wanderer, which improves our AP regen. So we don't necessarily need all that much AP. We don't need to power attack. We do have a significant damage output without power attacks, and therefore action points are basically only useful for us in terms of running around. But the thing where they are useful again is with our third perk here, Dodgy, which avoids incoming damage at the cost of AP. So obviously if we have our action points refreshing faster, we can avoid more damage, which is obviously a good thing at 20% health. On to luck. Well, you could debate here, Bloody Mess. This is one of the builds where you could really live without it. Your damage output, as you saw earlier, is definitely high enough so you can live without Bloody Mess. You could, if you have a problem with survivability, you could chuck in, where is it? I think I don't have it here. Here it is. Ricochet, which would help with armed enemies that shoot from range. But in this case, well, I just decided to go for Bloody Mess. Class Freak rank 3, simply because we do have a lot of mutations and we basically don't want to have significant debuffs to our strength, because that's directly influencing our damage output. And Starch Genes, well, obviously we want to have some mutations and want to keep them, so Starch Genes. I didn't take Serendipity. That's something most of you probably know, but as far as I'm aware, Serendipity doesn't work in power armor, as it says here. I think, if I remember correctly, that when the game launched, this wasn't true. Like, the part where no power armor stands was always there, but I think it worked when the game launched. Well, anyways, nowadays it doesn't work. So that's it for the build. We're now taking a look at our effects here. We do have our emergency protocols, which are activated simply because we're at low health. Nerd Rage, and we're currently under the influence of diluted red away, but that's unimportant. We actually have red worms, so that's why our radiation went a bit up at the end, but as you could see, it wasn't a problem. We didn't have to take a single red away, even though we fought high level ghouls. And our mutations here, we have Adrenal Reaction, Carnivore, Grounded, Marsupial, Scaly Skin, Speed Demon and Twisted Muscles. Simple overview, Adrenal Reaction is mandatory here simply because it further boosts our damage at low health, and we're always at low health. Carnivore, well, this one isn't necessary. I thought it just fitting the build simply because we were going for this mutant theme, and they are all about gore and eating meat. Grounded, we don't really need energy damage. We do have some energy damage on our super sledge through the heating coil, which is affected by this damage debuff. But honestly, it's I think it's something like 50 energy damage or something, which isn't a lot anyway. So if that is cut by half, it won't do all that much of a difference. And the extra energy resistance will do us a good favor. Marsupial, in this case actually we want to be dumber simply for role-playing reasons, but the jump height and the carry weight are always a good fit. Scaly Skin, as I said earlier, we don't need AP that much, only for dodgy, so another damage resistance and energy resistance doesn't hurt. Speed Demon, well, we're not using a weapon, so reloading isn't anything. Well, not a ranged weapon. So reload speed isn't a thing for us, but the simple fact that we can run faster brings home the point, so we want Speed Demon here. And Twisted Muscles, well, our melee attacks do more damage, what should I say? chance to cripple, and gun accuracy doesn't influence us at all because we never use a gun. So overall, I'd say that's about it. Well, just so you can see here, I didn't lie. That's our weapon here, a 1-star bloodied super sledge. That was the one I used through the video. And as for our apparel, it was indeed the left leg. Well, I do have... Now both legs are T60, I think. Well, anyways, the only important thing here is the ultraside torso with the emergency protocols. You can use any power armor though, so the only thing that you really need is the emergency protocols mod. Overall, that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching and hope you have a nice day. Bye.